The battle was already lost. Admiral Kelvar stood on the bridge of the Alliance flagship, valiant, watching as his fleet was torn apart. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. One by one, Alliance ships shattered, burned, and fell. The enemy was too strong. The Xorveth Empire had been unstoppable for years. Their warships were massive, armored like fortresses, and armed with weapons that could cut through shields like paper. The Alliance had fought bravely, but their numbers were too few. Kelvar gritted his teeth as another ship, the Orion Blade, was destroyed. Thousands of soldiers gone in an instant. His hands curled into fists. "We can't win this," his second-in-command, Captain Loren, whispered. Kelvar already knew. The Xorvath were ruthless. They gave no mercy. If the Alliance lost here, their worlds would burn. Their people would become slaves or corpses. The war would end today, and the galaxy would belong to the Xorvath. A deep, cruel voice echoed through the bridge speakers. "This is Overlord Krallis of the Xorveth Empire. Your resistance is meaningless. Your fleet is broken. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Kelvar's heart pounded. Surrender? Never. He slammed his fist on the control panel. "Get me all surviving ships." A holographic map flickered to life, showing the battlefield. Less than 20 ships remained. The Xorveth. Hundreds. Kelvar closed his eyes for a moment. He was a soldier, but this was a massacre. But then, a whisper of hope. Loren turned sharply. "Sir, we just received a signal." Kelvar frowned. "From where?" Loren hesitated. "That's the strange part. It came from Sector 0-1. Kelvar's breath caught in his throat. Sector 0-1. The coordinates where, centuries ago, the Terran race had vanished. A myth. A dead system. Kelvar stared at the blinking signal. It was old, encrypted, but undeniably human. The Xorvath had feared only one enemy in history. The humans. Overlord Krallis chuckled as he watched the last Alliance ships drift like wounded prey. Victory was already his. His second-in-command, General Vorlak, grinned. "Shall we finish them, my lord?" Krallis raised a clawed hand, about to give the final order. Then, a new signal. Something woke up in the void. A pulse, an ancient transmission. Krallis's grin faded, his scaled face twisted in confusion. "What is that?" Vorlak's claws tapped at the control panel, scanning the source. I don't know, my lord. It's coming from a dead system. A system that had been silent for centuries." Then, the impossible happened. Hundreds of unknown war signatures appeared on their sensors. They came from nowhere. Silent, cold, deadly. Vorlak's face darkened. "It's an armada." Krallis's eyes narrowed. "Whose?" A single message appeared on the Xorvath screens. It was not a request, not a warning. It was a declaration. Humanity's war is not over. Krallis's blood ran cold. The forgotten fleet had awakened, and they were coming. A deep silence fell over the battlefield. Admiral Kelvar stared at the incoming signatures on the holographic display. Hundreds of warships. They moved with perfect precision, no hesitation, no fear. Kelvar's mouth went dry. "Are those?" Loren swallowed hard. "It has to be them, sir. The Terran fleet. The legends said they had disappeared centuries ago. That after fighting their final war, humanity had vanished into the void. Some believed they were dead. Others believed they were only sleeping. Kelvar had never believed in myths. Until now. Xorvath command ship. Warbringer. Overlord Krallis watched in silence as the new fleet approached. Their ships were unlike anything seen before. Their hulls were dark, as if they absorbed light itself. No markings, no symbols. Only cold, silent death. Krallis bared his fangs. "Identify those warships. Now." His crew scrambled. The scans returned nothing. No known signatures, no active transmissions, Just silence. Then, without warning, a single Terran battleship opened fire. A Xorvath destroyer, one of the most powerful in their fleet, vanished in an instant. Not exploded, not crippled. It was erased. Panic erupted across the Xorvath fleet. Impossible. Vorlak snarled. What kind of weapon? Another Terran ship fired. Then another. Xorvath battleships fell like insects. The war had changed in seconds. Kelvar watched in shock as the Terran fleet tore through the Xorvath forces. Their weapons were beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. No energy trails, no visible projectiles, just instant annihilation. No wasted shots, no mercy. The Xorvath fleet, once the most feared force in the galaxy, was breaking. Kelvar's hands trembled. Send a message to them. Identify ourselves as allies. Lauren hesitated, then nodded. A transmission was sent. No response. The Terrans did not acknowledge them. They only continued the slaughter. Krallis clenched his claws. Retreat, he roared. The Xorvath fleet turned to run. But the Terrans had been waiting. A massive barrier of warships appeared behind the fleeing Xorvath vessels. No escape. The battlefield had become a death trap. One last message echoed through every comm channel. There is no surrender. And then the real massacre began. The battlefield had become a slaughterhouse. The Xorvath fleet, once the strongest force in the galaxy, was being torn apart. Their ships, built for war, were powerless against the ancient Terran armada. Admiral Kelvar and his surviving officers watched in stunned silence as the battle turned into an execution. No one is escaping, Loran whispered. Kelvar didn't respond. He couldn't. He had fought in countless wars, seen entire worlds burn. But this was different. The Terrans weren't fighting for victory. They were punishing the Xorvath. Xorvath command ship, Warbringer. Overlord Krallis gritted his fangs as his fleet crumbled around him. His empire's might. Useless. How are they doing this? Vorlak shouted. No one had an answer. The Terrans' weapons were invisible, their tactics flawless. Every move was calculated, every strike precise and merciless. The Xorvath were trying to retreat, but the Terrans were already there. They blocked every escape route, herding the Xorvath like prey. Krallis' scales burned with rage. We will not die like this. Fire everything. Massive energy barrages filled the void. The Warbringer unleashed its full power, a super weapon capable of destroying moons. The blast ripped toward a Terran battleship. The ship didn't move, didn't shield itself. It simply absorbed the attack. Vorlak's claws trembled. That's not possible. Then the Terran ship returned fire. Krallis' last thought was fear. Then his flagship ceased to exist. Kelvar watched as the Xorvath flagship vanished. No wreckage, no explosion, just gone. Loran exhaled. It's over. Kelvar wasn't so sure. The Xorvath fleet was finished, but the Terran fleet remained. They had come for war. But what would they do now? The answer came as a single transmission. The judgment is not complete. Kelvar's stomach twisted. The war was not over. Not yet. The void was silent. The Xorvath fleet, the once feared conquerors of the galaxy, was gone. Their mighty warships had been reduced to nothing but scattered wreckage and dust. Admiral Kelvar stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the holographic display. Not a single Xorvath vessel remained. But the Terran fleet was still here. Hundreds of dark, silent warships, floating like ancient ghosts. Their weapons had stopped firing, but their presence still sent a chill through the Alliance survivors. Kelvar's hands clenched. They're not leaving, Loran whispered. Kelvar took a slow breath. Send another message. Tell them who we are. Tell them. Before he could finish, the comm system crackled to life. A deep, distorted voice spoke. The Xorvath have been purged. Their crimes warranted extinction. Kelvar swallowed. This is Admiral Kelvar of the Alliance fleet. We are not your enemies. We fought against the Xorvath too. Please, identify yourselves. Silence. Then the voice returned. We are humanity's wrath. Kelvar's blood ran cold. Aboard the Terran dreadnought. Revenant. The bridge of the Revenant was dark, illuminated only by the soft glow of ancient monitors. Commander Doran Kane watched the battlefield with cold, calculating eyes. For centuries, humanity had been forgotten. For centuries, their fleet had slept. Until the signal came. Until they awoke. Now, the galaxy remembered them. One of his officers turned. The Xorvath are eliminated, sir. Orders. Doran's voice was calm, emotionless. Scan for Xorvath colonies. Find the worlds they ruled. The officer hesitated. And the survivors. Doran's fingers tightened around the armrest of his chair. Humanity had not returned as liberators. They had returned as executioners. His voice was cold. We finish what we started. The officer nodded. The Terran fleet turned toward the Xorvath homeworlds. The war was over. The punishment had just begun. The Xorvath homeworlds were doomed. Across the galaxy, the last remnants of the Xorvath Empire scrambled in desperation. Their war fleets had been wiped out. Their military stations reduced to dust. Their strongest warriors erased in seconds. But their greatest fear was not what had already happened. It was what came next. The Terran fleet was moving. Their black warships, silent and unstoppable, spread through Xorvath space like a plague. And there was nowhere left to run. Xorvath homeworld, Zorka Prime. Overlord Veragzan stood in his war chamber, surrounded by his last remaining generals. His claws dug into the metal table. His empire was dying. This can't be happening, one of his generals hissed. Humanity was gone. We destroyed them. Veragzan's eyes burned with hatred. No, we did not destroy them. We only gave them a reason to return. A mistake that could never be undone. A siren blared across the command center. An officer rushed in, his voice trembling. Overlord. The Terrans. The entire planet shook. A low rumble filled the sky as a massive shadow passed over the capital. Veragzan ran to the balcony. His breath caught in his throat. Above them, the Revenant, the largest of the Terran warships, loomed like a god of death. Its weapons began to glow. By the void, Veragzan whispered. There was no escape. Terran fleet. High orbit. Commander Doran Kane stood on the bridge of the Revenant, watching as the planet below descended into chaos. The Xorvath had ruled through fear. They had crushed weaker races, burned entire worlds. Humanity had not forgotten. Doran's officer turned. The capital is defenseless, sir, awaiting orders. Doran's voice was ice. Burn it down. The Revenant's cannons roared. Xorvath homeworld. Last moments. Veragzan watched in horror as beams of light rained from the sky. The capital's tallest spires melted into molten slag. Buildings crumbled. The streets erupted in fire. The Xorvath, once the galaxy's most feared conquerors, screamed in terror. Veragzan fell to his knees. This was not war. This was judgment. Admiral Kelvar's fleet arrived too late. From his ship's viewport, he saw the Xorvath homeworld burning. The Terran fleet hovered above, silent and emotionless. Kelvar gritted his teeth. By the stars, they destroyed them. Loren swallowed hard. Sir, what if they're not finished? Kelvar's gut twisted. The Xorvath were gone. But now, the Terran fleet was looking at the rest of the galaxy. And Kelvar realized the truth. No one was safe. The fires of Zorka Prime still burned. From high orbit, the once mighty Xorvath homeworld was now nothing but scorched ruins. The cities, the great war academies, the towering fortresses, all reduced to molten rubble. The Terran fleet remained. Their ships hovered in the darkness, silent and motionless, like ancient gods waiting for the next world to judge. Admiral Kelvar watched from his command deck, his heart pounding. They, they destroyed everything, he muttered. Lauren, standing beside him, swallowed hard. Sir, we should leave. Right now. Kelvar didn't respond. He couldn't look away. Because at that moment, the Terran fleet moved. Hundreds of black warships turned their weapons away from the Xorveth remains and toward the rest of the galaxy. Alliance High Command, Galactic Core. The emergency meeting had begun. Representatives from every major species gathered in the vast war chamber, their voices filled with fear. The Xorveth are gone, a reptilian ambassador hissed, wiped out in a single day. This is madness. A feathered diplomat trembled. Their fleets, their colonies, their homeworld, erased. If the Terrans can do this to the Xorveth, what will they do to the rest of us? A massive armored warrior slammed his fist on the table. We must prepare for war. We cannot wait for them to strike first. A nervous murmur spread across the chamber. For centuries, the Terrans had been a forgotten myth. Now, they had returned as unstoppable executioners. No one knew their next move. No one knew if they would stop. And that uncertainty terrified the entire galaxy. Terran Dreadnought. Revenant. Commander Doran Kane studied the reports flashing across his screen. The Xorvath were eradicated. Their homeworlds burned, their species hunted to extinction. But humanity's mission was not complete. Humanity had once been betrayed. The galaxy had turned against them, declared them too dangerous, too unpredictable. They had been exiled, forgotten. Now, they had returned. Doran turned to his officers. Status report. All ships are in formation, sir, awaiting new orders. Doran's lips curled into a cold smile. Set course for the Alliance worlds. The officer hesitated. Sir, the Alliance helped us. They fought against the Xorveth too. Doran's voice was like steel. And where were they when we needed help? A heavy silence fell over the bridge. The order was given. The fleet turned toward the core worlds. And the galaxy shook in fear. The Terran fleet moved like a storm across the void. One by one, their warships entered Alliance space, their dark hulls cutting through the stars like silent executioners. On every Alliance world, panic spread like wildfire. Civilizations that had once ruled with power now trembled in fear. Humanity had returned, and they were unstoppable. Alliance High Command. Emergency War Council. Admiral Kelvar stood before the gathered leaders, his face grim. We have two choices, he said. We surrender, or we fight. Silence filled the chamber. An insectoid diplomat clicked its mandibles. Fight. Against that. It gestured toward the holographic display of the Terran fleet. Hundreds of dreadnoughts, battleships, and cruisers, each capable of destroying entire planets. We don't stand a chance, another ambassador whispered. A reptilian general growled. We must try. We are the Alliance. We will not be hunted like the Xorveth. Kelvar took a deep breath. He had seen the Terrans fight. They did not fight for survival. They fought for vengeance. And there was no force in the galaxy more dangerous than a species with nothing to lose. We must send a message, Kelvar said. Not of war, of peace, if they listen. A sudden alarm blared through the chamber. A trembling officer ran inside. They're here. On the holographic display, the Terran fleet had arrived at the Alliance core worlds. The final battle was about to begin. Terran Dreadnought. Revenant. Commander Doran Kane stood at the bridge, watching the Alliance fleets scrambling for defense. Their warships moved into formation, weapons charge. It wouldn't matter. The battle was already decided. A communication request appeared on his screen. Kelvar's voice came through. Terran fleet, this is Admiral Kelvar of the Alliance. We don't want war. We only want peace. Doran's expression remained cold. Peace. His voice was emotionless. Where was your peace when we were exiled? When the galaxy abandoned us? Kelvar's voice was desperate. We were wrong. But we fought with you against the Xorvath. That has to count for something. Doran's fingers hovered over the command console. The order to fire was ready. The fleet was waiting. The galaxy held its breath. Would humanity show mercy? Or would they finish what they started? The galaxy stood on the edge of destruction. Across the Alliance core worlds, civilians watched in terror as the Terran fleet filled the skies. Their warships, black as the void, hovered like executioners, weapons primed, engines burning. In the war chambers of 100 species, leaders whispered their final prayers. Would humanity erase them all, as they had the Xorvath? Or was there still hope? Terran Dreadnought. Revenant. Commander Doran Kane's finger hovered over the final command. One signal. One word. Fire. And the war would be over before it could even begin. On his screen, Admiral Kelvar's desperate plea echoed through the bridge. We were wrong. We abandoned you, but we fought with you against the Xorvath. Please, don't make us pay for our past mistakes. Silence filled the command deck. Doran's officers waited. The crew trusted him. They would follow his will. He took a slow breath. Humanity had been exiled, hunted, left to die. And yet, they had returned stronger than ever. They had proven their power. But was destruction the only path? Doran's hand curled into a fist. Open a channel to the Alliance, he said. The screen flickered. Across the galaxy, every leader, every general, every terrified soldier listened. Doran's voice was cold, sharp, unshaken. This is the Terran fleet. The Xorvath are gone. The war is over. A long pause. But hear this. We will never be forgotten again. The galaxy held its breath. Would the Terrans strike? Would they burn the Alliance homeworlds like they had done to the Xorvath? Doran finally gave the order. Stand down. A wave of relief swept through the stars. The greatest war in history had ended, not with fire, but with a warning. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never dare betray them again.